Hello. Thank you for joining us today for this press conference. My name is Maya Dorwaz. I am a media officer with the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, covering special procedures media outreach. And this press conference is held by the UN Special Rapporteur on torture and other inhuman treatment, Dr. Alice Edwards. I will give her the floor to give us a few opening remarks, and then we will open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for turning up to this press conference. Yesterday I delivered my first report to the Human Rights Council here in Geneva with the focus on looking at good practices and the challenges around legislation for the investigation of crimes of torture. As I recounted that since starting in this position, my first half year in the position has been characterized by escalating incidents of torture and inhuman treatment in many countries. I've been inundated with requests to intervene on behalf of alleged victims. In the 12 months from January to December 2022, the mandate, including my predecessor, submitted 72 communications to 44 different governments, noting that there was a 6-month gap between appointments. The real number is probably double that, and also, of course, limited by resource constraints. In that regard, I wanted to mention 3 specific cases that I've been following. One is of the Nobel Prize winner Ales Bialiatski of Belarus and his colleagues who have been now sentenced. In Turkey, Şebnem Finaci, who is one of the architects of the Istanbul Protocol on the investigation and documentation of torture, who has been sentenced to over 2 years in prison for speaking out to the government, and of course the wide range of cases in relation to the Iranian women's movement, and also the 100 persons that are currently on death row as a consequence. I've been following up on a range of other cases, and I'll leave that to the question and answer session. But in terms of my thematic report, I wanted to focus on the duty to investigate the crime of torture, as I have found that this is universally under-implemented obligation of states. And related to that, of course, is putting in place an appropriate legislative framework, a crime of torture itself, as well as independent prosecutions and sentences that are in alignment with the gravity of the offence. The reason for looking at national investigations as the primary responders is because the scale and scope of crimes of torture being perpetrated every day, it will never be enough for reliance by the international community on international mechanisms, no matter how active and important those mechanisms may be. And although we should certainly be using all mechanisms and avenues at our disposal, it is important that there is local accountability also for healing, reconciliation amongst people in societies. I made a comment yesterday that when a state fails to defend truth and justice, it becomes an accomplice in torture. I wanted to tackle the perception that a number of governments have that launching criminal investigations into torture is seen to threaten or undermine their legitimacy, and so that leads to cover-ups, witness tampering, intimidation and reprisals against both victims as well as whistleblowers. And on the contrary, what really threatens governmental legitimacy is impunity. Investigating torture is an important function of a rights-based and open society. Failing to do so has all the hallmarks of a closed society. The report sets out a whole range of challenges from the institutional and structural through to the legal, cultural and practical, and it also gives examples of how they can be tackled, drawing on practice of states themselves. I did want to mention to you in this briefing that I've counted 105 countries that have an explicit crime of torture in their national law, and that is an encouraging trajectory. Of course, not all of those laws are in full alignment with the Convention Against Torture, but there is room, and there is room for improvement. I also noted in this research that there are a number of countries that continue to have torture within torture within statute books that makes it lawful, such as allowing indefinite solitary confinement or corporal punishment, as well as permitting torture or ill treatment or other similar forms to force or extract information or a confession. And containing those laws in national legislation means that those types of incidents are unprosecutable. So I've called for those laws to be repealed immediately. I spent a lot of the report on looking at the particular situation of victims and survivors of the crime of torture, and what I emphasised to the states that because of the power asymmetry between the public official and the victim, the public official in this case, as opposed to ordinary criminal circumstances, being both the state that's going to take action against the perpetrator, but also the perpetrator itself. And that situation of particular precarity requires some rebalancing, and the main recommendation of the report is for states to equip, enable and empower independent investigative bodies and officials to operate promptly and with the necessary urgency, and that requires that they be hierarchically, administratively and financially separate from the broader administration. And I think on that note, I'll leave it there, and I'm open for questions either on the report or on broader issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. So we will open questions from the room first, if there are any. No. So we will quickly move to the to those on Zoom. Please state your name and the agency you work for. We will take one question at a time. Thank you.